إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المكتوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين آمين جزاك الله خير عبد الحكيم.
Thank you very much. So before I turn it over to Sheikh Bradford, I want to go through and give a brief introduction of him, and then we'll definitely have him take control and go through the presentation. So Sheikh Bradford is an entrepreneur and American scholar of Islam. He holds a Master of Islamic Law from the University of Medina and has studied traditionally in the Muslim world for over the past 20 years. He was recently a VP and Senior Sharia Consultant for Al Rajhi Bank, the largest Islamic bank in the Middle East. Joe is one of the few experts on issues involving Muslims and finance in North America. While his expertise spans many areas, he has focused his efforts on creating companies that allow people of faith and conviction to align their values with their finances. He was co-founder of mywasiya.com and has leveraged his extensive knowledge of Islamic inheritance to create a world-class product that bridges the gap between traditional Islamic knowledge and requirements of the U.S. current legal system. Sheikh Bradford is also the Sharia advisor to Zoya Finance, an app that makes halal investing easy by helping you build and monitor a Sharia-compliant investment portfolio. And lastly, he's principal of Money Coach. Sheikh Bradford works with businesses and individuals to build a comprehensive overview of financial health, goals, and values, allowing his clients to take steps needed to achieve financial success and align their business and personal finances to their values as a Muslim. So with that, we will turn it over to Sheikh Bradford and allow him to share his knowledge with us.
All right, Assalamu alaikum. Jazakallah khair, and I appreciate the introduction, Hakeem, and I'm honored to be here for this event. I recall when TTY was just getting started, and there were, meetups at Sinat Masjid and at Masjid Mu'mineen, and mashallah, it's amazing to see how much time has passed, and and how successful all of the attendees have grown into their own as adults, and alhamdulillah, I'm really happy that I'm here to be able to share with you guys today. So what I wanted to talk to you today about was simple tips to grow your wealth. And so the idea here is that we're going to go over a couple of different concepts that have to do with our values as Muslims involved in the investment and money management space. Now, a lot of times people will use the word Islamic finance. And Islamic finance has become known as a term for a very specific industry, both in Muslim majority countries and even in the United States. And I think that sometimes when we focus only on Islamic finance as an industry, what happens is we don't realize that there are so many other issues that deal with our money that aren't banking and mortgages and investments, that really have to do with our aligning our values to managing and conceptualizing our money properly, that we kind of get a little bit lost. So there's three spheres that we should be worried about when we talk about our engagement with money as Muslims. The first sphere is the sphere of Islamic law, of halal and haram, of what to do and not to do as far as individual contracts and contract types go. The second sphere is the sphere of Islamic ethics and what is right or wrong, what is better, what is best, what is bad, what is worst, and how do we make decisions based on that. And then thirdly is this more philosophical sphere where we're talking about the normative value of economics, the concept of man, the concept of wealth. How do we view their interaction, so on and so forth. So in looking at this topic, we have to kind of take a step back and we have to ask ourselves, when we're talking about our money, what is our legacy? So for those of you that are here today, what's your legacy? Those brothers and sisters who started TTY early on and had, given countless hours, selfless hours. My good friend Abdullah Daoudu, who, my former, neighbor at one time, and we've been in touch for so many years. I remember, I remember walking into the masjid one day when he was teaching the group, and someone was doing something, and he said to him, he said, you want to go halfway, Allah's going to give you halfway. Go back and do what you're asked, complete your salah. And the passion that he showed at that time really was I still remember that incident until today, because the idea that you can, it takes a village, you can take a whole generation of people and raise them up, is something that a lot of us, we just don't think about. And so now that you've gone through this process and you are up on your own, and you're starting, your parents have their legacy, and now you have to create your legacy. How will your legacy be an extension of what your elders and parents and mentors and peers have done in the community? How will you take the very solid foundation that you have, that you were gifted, and use it to catapult you forward? And that's one of the really important questions that we have to ask ourselves. And one of the most important things that we can do in starting our legacy is to be consistent and to be intentional in doing what we know is right. The Prophet ﷺ said, إِذَا قَامَتِ السَّاعَةِ وَفِي يَدِ أَحَدِكُمْ فَصِيلَةٌ فَلْيُغْرِسْهَا. In the hadith of Anas, it's collected in the Musnad of Imam Ahmed, the Prophet ﷺ said, if the day of judgment comes and one of you has a seedling in his hand, a baby plant, he's planting a plant, and the day of judgment comes, finish planting it. Let him plant it. Don't throw it away and run. So even at the most dire of times, it's still important for you to have an intention that something will last after you. That tree, that seedling will grow into a great oak one day. And there's an interesting statement with regards to money by the famous investor Warren Buffett. He said, someone is sitting in the shade today because someone planted a tree many years ago. There's a Chinese proverb that says, the best time to have planted a tree was 20 years ago. And the second best time is today. So you have to think about, what sense of urgency do I have to leave something behind after me? Where do I want to see myself? What do I want to accomplish? How do I want to benefit myself, my family, my community, and broader society? Now, today, this is what we're going to cover. And inshallah, we'll have plenty of time to talk about these issues. And I'd like to reserve the questions until the end. But we're going to cover the necessity of an education and leveraging the rich heritage that we have as Muslims in the areas of business and financial dealings. Secondly, we want to talk about assessing our needs. How do we actually get our hands on the steering wheel and gain control of things? Thirdly, we'll talk about building a plan, because none of this really matters if you're not going to take action. And then fourthly, because we're talking about money, we want to talk about investing wisely. What does it mean for a Muslim to be invested and investing wisely? And then lastly, we want to be strategic. We want to have the long game in sight. How do we protect everything that we've built? You today can take some of that information and maybe even help your elders and parents protect what they have, and then you also protect what you have. So let's jump right into it. Leveraging our rich Islamic heritage. Many times we think of finance as a topic that is value neutral. It's just money. It's not informed by anything. Finance is built on business. Business is built on contract. Contract is built on relationship. And relationships are built on what you as a human being value. So it's important for us to understand what we value in order for us to make those values go through that string of relationships to contracts to business to finance to affecting the world. Now, one of the main values that we as Muslims should always keep in mind is that the pious people of the past in Islam, they valued financial independence. They were active in business and investing for that purpose. They took light of the risks and the rewards. They remained emotionally detached so that they didn't fall in love with the dunya, but they also didn't despair from Allah's sustenance. The famous student of Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, his name was Mujahid, he was asked about Allah's statement, Kulu min tayyibati ma razaqnakum. Eat of the wholesome things we've provided. He said, this means tijara, business. In the Musnad of Imam Ahmad, a man came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and he said, Ayyul kasbi atyab. Which earnings are most wholesome? The Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, he said, عمل الرجل بيده عمل الرجل بيده وكل بيع مبرور. The most wholesome earnings are a man's working with his own two hands, and every blessed transaction. So you're either going to make something, build something, or you're going to buy something, sell something. This is the basis of everything that you're going to do. You're either going to buy or sell time. You're going to buy or sell assets. You're going to be involved. You have to be directly involved in order to have that wholesome gain. Another one of the Salaf named Abdullah ibn Mubarak, may Allah be pleased with him, from the students of the Sahaba. He was teaching his students about leaving off the dunya and being detached from the world and not giving in to desires. And someone said to him, you know, you order us to leave off the world and to give up, what we, give up the worldly life, give up materialism. But yet we see you go and buy products from Asia and then come and sell them in Mecca and Medina. So isn't there some contradiction? He said, I only do this so I can protect my honor and my reputation. And I use the proceeds for obedience to Allah. Another one of the pious of the past, Sufyan al-Thawri, he used to say, Lawla hadhihi darahim, latamandala bi as-salatin. If it weren't for these gold coins, then the authorities would come and wipe their hands with me. He didn't want to be anybody's rag. He didn't want to be anybody's washcloth. He wanted to stand on his own. So the idea of financial independence is paramount. And it's a mindset more than anything else. You have to understand that anything that was promised to you will come to you. And anything that was not promised to you will not make it to you as hard as you try. And it's something that I think baffles many people. That, aren't I supposed to try my best? Yes, you're supposed to try your best. But are you trying your best for the purpose of gain, for the purpose of financial gain? Or are you trying your best because that's the value that you put into the world? When you put value into the world because of your good intentions for Allah, Allah gives you this world. But when you only focus on money and finance and the numbers without actually creating value, then all of that blessing is obliterated and you'll only reach whatever was written for you. The Prophet ﷺ said, Man kanat ad-dunya hammahu, farraqa Allahu shamlahu, wa ja'ala al-faqra bayna 'aynayhi, wa lam ya'tihi min ad-dunya illa ma kutiba lahu. Whoever has this world as his worry, Allah will disperse his affairs, and he will place poverty right between his eyes, and nothing of this life will come to him except what was written for him. وَمَنْ كَانَتِ الْآخِرَ نِيَّتُهُ, and whoever has the next life as his intention, جَمَعَ اللَّهُ شَمْلَهُ, Allah will gather for him his affairs, وَأَتَتْهُ الدُّنْيَا وَهِيَ رَاغِمَةٌ. And the worldly life will come and throw itself at his feet. So in understanding how to act, how to operate, how to be financially dependent, it takes a certain level of emotional intelligence to detach yourself from what the false expectations that have, and to attach yourself to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the truthfulness of his promises. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, الشيطان يعدكم الفقر ويأمركم بالفحشاء والله يعدكم مغفرة منه وفضلا والله واسع عليم. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Shaitan promises you poverty and orders you to do lewdness. And Allah promises you forgiveness from him and bounty. And Allah is all-encompassing, all-knowing. So we never need to despair from Allah's sustenance. We never need to despair from the bounty and the blessing of Allah, as long as we keep it in our intentions pure and understand that what we're doing is to remain independent of his creation and dependent upon him only. Now, when we talk about the areas of finance, one of the big issues that comes up always is borrowing and lending. We find from those pious people of the past, from the prophet, to the companions, to their students, that they would avail themselves of permissible means of credit and debt. They would avoid paying and taking interest. And they would extend leniency to those who are in need, hoping for reward of charity in doing so. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Baqarah, those who consume interest will stand on the day of judgment like those driven mad to Satan by Satan's touch. ذلك بأنهم قالوا إنما البيع مثل الربا وأحل الله البيع وحرم الربا. That is because they say trade is no different than interest, but Allah has permitted trade and forbidden interest. So whoever refrains after having received warning from their Lord may keep their previous gains, and their case is left to Allah. As for those who persist, then they will be the residents of the fire. They will be there forever. Allah has made interest fruitless and charity fruitful, and Allah does not like any ungrateful evildoer. Indeed, those who believe, do good, and establish prayer and pay alms tax will receive the reward from their Lord, and there will be no fear for them, nor shall they grieve. So this verse plots out for us some very important rules. That we don't borrow and lend at interest. We don't give cash for more cash now for more cash later. And that we also make sure that when people are in financial difficulty and they are in debt, that we don't throw them deeper into debt by charging them interest, but instead we give them respite until they can pay. Also, we keep in mind that there's a charitable component for a successful economy. You have to have a for-profit part of your economy, and you have to have a non-profit part of your economy. And both of them work in tandem for the good of all society. In the hadith collected by Ibn Hibban, that Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu said, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, whoever loans an amount twice, it's as if he has given it in charity once. So when the companions of the Prophet ﷺ would give cash loans, they would do so with the intention that they're getting half of the reward in charity. So if I loan you $2,000, then my reward is as if I've given $1,000 in charity. And if I loan it to you again, then I get the full $2,000 in charity. Recognizing that there is a time value for the money, but that time value is forgiven and is transferred to the idea of donative or charitable means, so that we don't allow lending to become a tool for oppression and to keep people in constant debt. And you might say, well, what are the alternatives? There are many alternatives. We won't go into them at this slide, but we want to just talk about the principle of the matter. Why were they doing this? They were avoiding the interest because Allah warned against it, and because the ramifications of people being in constant debt were huge, which shows us that in a time, in a day, in a time when we have access to so much credit, we can take on enormous amounts of debt, that it obliterates the gains that we have. I was watching an interview between Georgetown University Business School and a very famous investor named Monish Pabra. And they asked him, what was the biggest mistake that you made or the biggest loss that you had, and the biggest thing that you regret from your business? And he said, the most money I ever lost was going into debt services and owning a mortgage company. And we lost so much money. And he goes, I don't think I'll ever be doing that again. So is it wrong to go into debt? No, it's not wrong. Is it wrong to use charity? No, it is not. But two things must be taken into consideration. Don't go into it where you're going to pay interest, and also don't go into it if you can't pay your bills. The Prophet ﷺ passed away, and his shield was pawned for a few handfuls of wheat from a Jewish lender in town. What does this mean? The Prophet ﷺ wanted to show that it's permissible to do business with Jews and Christians and people of other faiths. He wanted to show that it is permissible to collateralize what you have and to borrow against that. But he also wanted to show that when that becomes due, then you pay it off, but there's no interest. So it's not wrong to use credit. It's not wrong to go into debt at times, but it's the interest-bearing debt that continuously drives you into insolvency that is the problem. Now, another big issue when we talk about values is to understand, why do we even talk about budgeting and savings? We find that the scholars of the past, the pious people of the past, they would manage their money, they would meet their financial responsibilities, they would repay their debts, they wouldn't overspend, and they wouldn't take on so much debt as to put themselves into difficulty, so that it would affect their character and their moral standing. One of the things the Prophet ﷺ used to make dua against every morning and every evening. Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min al-ma'thami wal-maghram. Oh Allah, I seek refuge in you from sinfulness and indebtedness. And someone said, oh Messenger of Allah, we hear you making this dua so much. So this is something that even the companions noticed casually. We hear you making this dua so much. Why do you do that? قال إذا دان الرجل, when a man goes into debt, then he has a difficult time. And when he has a difficult time, then he lies. And if he lies, then he enters the hellfire. So the moral implications of improper financial management is something that very early in your life you have to get a grip on. Because if you keep thinking about your money as separated from your morals, you will be taken down a very long, very winding, very dangerous path that can lead to your financial destruction. The Prophet ﷺ himself would budget. He said, if I had the like of Mount Uhud in gold, I wouldn't let 2 nights pass except I'd spend it in the path of Allah, except for something that I stash away for debt. Those who hoard will be without on the day of judgment, except those who give like this and give like this and give like this. Al-aktharuna humul aqalluna yawm al-qiyamah. Those with a lot will have very little on the day of judgment, except for those who give like this, give like this, and give like this. Meaning that the Prophet ﷺ budgeted. He knew what his debts were and he knew how he could pay them. Number 2, going into debt was permissible as long as you had the plan to pay it off. Number 3, if you are giving charity and you are wealthy, you are not considered to be hoarding. So if you have a lot of money and you're paying your zakah, you're not considered to be hoarding or doing judgment. So how do you escape it? How do you not reach the day of judgment with small amount of good deeds and a lot of money to fuel the flame, give your charity, give your zakah, make sure you understand how and why, and the proper intention in doing so, that it is an act of worship for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Similarly, another principle, guiding principle of financial management that relates to the values that we have as a Muslim is spending and forecasting. So when you're spending and forecasting, we look to the past, we find that the Salaf, they would make sure that their financial management included charity and giving, that they met their household needs, and that they allowed them to do well as to do good. In Bukhari, it's collected that the Prophet ﷺ said, "Give in charity and do not give reluctantly, lest Allah should give you a limited amount. And do not withhold your money, lest Allah should withhold from you." And in another hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, it was said to him by Asma, the daughter of Abu Bakr, she said, "O Prophet of Allah, I do not have anything but that which Zubair brings to me. Is there any sin on me if I give a small amount of that which he brings to me?" He said, "Give whatever you can and do not withhold what you have, lest Allah withhold provision from you." So ask yourself, why is Asma asking this question? Because she wants to make sure that she's managing her husband's money properly. And that even if he approves, is it still right for her to take the maintenance that he's giving her for the home and use it on charity? That's something that she wanted to know. Number two, is there any contradiction between spending on one's family and charity? The Prophet ﷺ said in another hadith, إِذَا أَنْفَقَ الْمَرْءُ الْمُسْلِمُ عَلَى أَهْلِهِ مُحْتَسِبًا ذَلِكَ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ عُدَّتْ لَهُ مِنَ الصَّدَقَةِ. That if a Muslim man spends on his family with the intention of Allah taking that into account, it is counted for him as sadaqah. So there's a problem when we're so generous to others, but we don't pay the bills at home. The Prophet ﷺ said, "في كل كبد رطب صدقة حتى اللقمة تضعها في زوجك صدقة." In every living thing is a sadaqah. Even the morsel of food you put in your wife's mouth is considered sadaqah. So we have to enter into spending and forecasting. How much money do we expect to make? How much money are we spending? Are we going to meet the needs of our family and be able to give? So there's no contradiction to the two. But what happens is some people so generous, but not taking care of the family at home, or so stingy, they don't even take care of the family at home, nor do they give to anyone else. Balancing that out shows us that we have reliance upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and that we're standing for the things that He has ordered us to do. So these values should lead us to the next point, and that's where we want to start to assess our needs. We want to ask ourselves, what does it mean to have a good life? There are 4 components to having a good life. The first of them is connection, control, competence, and context. What do we mean by each of these? When we talk about our money, if we want to have a good financial life, we need to look and see, who are we connected with? Are we coming together as a community and supporting each other? Or are we simply allowing each other to flounder by the side? Are we able to leverage our strengths as a community? Or is everyone fighting for the scraps by themselves? When we come to people that are like-minded and we connect with them, then we have to look at the context that we live in. What are the needs that we have? Many years ago, Masjid al-Mu'mineen was simply an empty lot. Then it was a small masjid. Then it was added on. Then the community hall. Then the parking lots. And I'm sure as time goes on, the needs will get even more. And we have all, many different types of masajid and schools and all of that around the community. But what about the businesses? What about the charitable endowments? What about leveraging the collective wealth of the community to catalyst and push the community forward? We can do that here in Houston, but we have to understand the context of that. Then we look to the competence. And we have to say to ourselves, this is between competence and control. Projects usually fail, whether they're individual financial management, family financial management, community financial management. They fail because of these two things. You can remain in control and recognize that you're not competent for the job. You can remain in control by educating yourself about what you need to do financially, but then hiring or getting advice from someone who is competent and is able to guide you on how to make the best decisions, given your context and who you're connected to. See, what happens is a lot of Muslims, when they want to get into, they go and they start a job, they're HR reps at work, they say, we have a 401k. We'll put you in touch with our fund manager. So they have connection. But the person they're connected to doesn't share their values, doesn't understand their unique context as a Muslim. And so one of two things happens. They say, well, this person's clearly competent. I'm going to give him everything and let him do whatever he wants. Or they take control and they do nothing. So either they open the door for all types of things, some halal and some haram, or they close the door on everything, halal and haram. So balancing these four things is what gives us a good life. Connecting with others, being in control by educating ourselves, but recognizing other people's expertise and competence, and then living according to the contexts that we're in to make the best decisions for ourselves, our families, and our communities. Why is this so important? Why is it so important to talk about our wealth? Because the Prophet ﷺ said in the hadith in At-Tirmidhi, لا تزول قدم عبد يوم القيامة حتى يسأل عن أربع. A man's 2 feet will not move on the day of judgment until he is asked about 4 things. One of those 4 things, وعن ماله من أين اكتسبه وفيما أنفقه. About his wealth, where he earned it and how he spent it. So you will be asked on the day of judgment, where did you make your money? Oh, you contributed $200,000 and now your 401k is $1.5 million. Where did you earn that? Was it halal? Was it haram? Did you make the right decisions? On the day of judgment, each and every one of us will be brought in front of Allah, and we will speak to him without a translator. The hadith of Ibn Abbas and Bukhari. The Prophet ﷺ said that you will speak to Allah. You will speak to the Lord of the worlds. There will be no translator between you and him. And he will say, my slave, did you not do such and such thing at such and such time on such and such day? And the slave of Allah will have nothing to say except, yes, Lord, I know. Yes, Lord, I know. I Rabbi a'rif, I Rabbi a'rif. And then Allah will say to him, لَقَدْ سَتَرْتُهَا عَلَيْكَ فِي الدُّنْيَا وَإِنِّي أَغْفِرُهَا لَكَ الْيَوْمِ. I have hid this sin from the people in the past life, and I forgive you of that on this day. May Allah make us from amongst those who are forgiven on that day. Ameen. So it's so important that we understand what it is we're doing with our money. Now, remember, given our context, we may not be able to do what's optimal and is 100%. But guess what? 100%, 95% is better than 0. 85% is better than 0. 85% is definitely better than negative 85. Some people say, well, I can't do exactly what I want to do Islamically. Better just go to the haram. No, you have a moral responsibility to do the best that you can in building wealth in a way that is most pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, what are the things in our lives that are worth all of the money in the world? If you ask people, they'll give you all types of answers. Good health. Ask, they have a saying in Arabic, الصحة تاج لا يراها إلا المرضى. That good health is a crown which is only seen by the ill. Good health is a crown that's only seen by the sick. You don't realize that you have good health until you lose it. نعمتان مغبون فيهما أكثر الناس الصحة والفراغ. The Prophet ﷺ said, two blessings most people miss out on: good health and free time. Good health and free time. Use that free time for another thing that's worth all the money in the world: finding purpose, working a fulfilling job, something that allows you to create value, that makes you fulfilled. Another thing, financial freedom, not having to answer to people, to others, but being able to. There's a big difference between having to answer to someone and wanting to answer to someone. Giving and volunteering. Our wealth can only take us so far. Studies have shown that generally, especially here in the United States, generally, if you make $75,000 or more, you're not fulfilled by making more money. Yes, you can do more things, you can spend more, but when you get 75 to 125 in that range, depending upon where you live in the States, more money doesn't necessarily increase your happiness. What increases your happiness? Giving, volunteering, doing things that are meaningful for you and those around you. So inevitably, what is worth all of the money in the world? Your akhirah, your next life. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that if those who disbelieve on the day of judgment, that they will wish they had this, the entire dunya and everything in it, the like thereof, to use as ransom on the day of judgment. So your akhirah can never be compromised. So you have to ask yourself, how can I use my money to carry me to a good life in this life and in the next, instead of being a burden for me? And we can do that by building a plan. Now, when we talk about building a plan, the very, very key, point that we have to be cognitive is having a budget. And many people, they think that having a budget's not that big. I should just spend and then make money and it'll all equal out. What you'll find though is if you take that approach, inevitably you will start to leak money. So what I tell everyone to do is, get yourself a notepad, physical pen and paper. Get yourself a notepad. For at least 3 weeks, write down everything you've purchased, everything you've bought, everything you've earned. Write the amount down, what you did, what you bought, and then how you felt afterwards, and start to journal your budget. Track your spending. Then say to yourself, okay, which of these bills can I not live without? Okay, electricity. I have to pay the electricity bill. Otherwise, everything else goes after that. I have to pay the internet bill. Okay, that's fixed. Variable. Well, I could probably, stop for less carry out, less food from the restaurant. I could probably eat home more. You can cut back on that. Start to monitor the changes. When you've monitored those changes, you're going to increase your saving, decrease your spending. And when you do that, then you'll have more left over at the end of the month that you can then allocate to investments, allocate to retirement, allocate to healthcare, allocate to charity. But if you're not paying attention to any of these things, then you will find, especially when you're young, especially when you're young, that it will be extremely difficult to rein in your behavior if you become accustomed to always spending paycheck to paycheck. I know people that are in their 40s and 50s that live paycheck to paycheck. Why? Because when they were in their teens and their 20s, they spent all of their money paycheck to paycheck because they wanted quick satisfaction. We don't want quick satisfaction. We want funded contentment. If you were to think of every year of your life as a block that you're going to fill, and the more that you fill, the more difficult it becomes to get there, what would you do? You're going to fill up the blocks that are farther away from you, so that by the time you reach your old age, you have treasure chests full of wealth that are filled up. But if you spend everything in the beginning, as older that you get, the more time that you have to spend, it becomes exponentially more difficult for you to keep filling things up into the future, because you're always trying to fill up the past because you spent everything from the past. So starting with a budget, if you're in college, if you finish college in your early career, if you're 30 or younger and you're blessed to have a family that will allow you to live at home and you don't have to pay many bills, then you should not be following conventional financial wisdom, because conventional American financial wisdom is predicated on the fact that you live on your own and that your housing costs are 50% of your bills and 30% goes towards, or 20% goes towards your your needs, and then another 15% or 20% goes towards your wants, and then you take 10% and you put that away in savings. But most of us in Muslim families, we're not living on our own. We're living with our parents, our grandparents, our siblings. We're pooling resources. If you are in a situation where you can pool your resources, then you have to flip the script. You have to live off of 10% and take that 50% and put that away into savings and investments and retirement. And believe me, when you do that, as soon as you become affluent, as soon as you get into that job where the salary is really nice, you would have completely covered yourself for the rest of your expenses for your life. I have a client. He lives here in Houston. He's in his mid-50s. When he was in college, he opened up a Roth IRA, and he would put $50 a month into his Roth IRA. And when he graduated, he got a job, and he started putting away the max that he could put into that from, say, the age of 22 to 32. So consistently putting away $5,000 to $6,000 every year for a decade, plus a few thousand from his, or a few hundred from his college age. When he was 32 years old, he got a job that made so much money, he was now not allowed to contribute to the Roth IRA anymore. Because if you make more than a certain cap, which is about 105,000 to 210,000 for a married couple, 105 for a single couple, for a single person, you can't contribute to an IRA anymore. So for only 10 years, he contributed to an IRA. Then he never put any more money in it. When we opened his account at age 55, he had nearly $2.2 million in that account. And he was only invested in 2 funds, a Mana Mutual Growth, a Mana Mutual Income. That's it. And that money grew that exponentially. Why? Because he made sure that early in his career, he put as much as he could away. And so if you're not like him, his family was in another country and he was here by himself, but you have family here and or you're living with friends, and you all can pool and create a strategy on your own. You want, the phrase goes that when the water rises, all boats rise with it. We want all the boats to rise. We don't want to be around friends that are wasteful, friends that are frivolous, friends that aren't responsible. We want the friends that are going to be talking about investments, talking about savings, talking about responsibility, talking about duty to their parents and to their families, while still pursuing their own dreams and creating their own legacy. So after this budget is done, the very first thing that you should be doing is taking whatever is extra and putting it away until you've saved up 6 months of your monthly expenses. And you can put that into a safety deposit box. You can put it in a safe place. You can put it into a bank account. You can put it in your sock drawer. However, if your monthly expenses are $3,000, then preferably you should have $18,000 in an emergency fund that you do not touch, and that allows you at any time, if you quit your job, if you're fired from your job, if you're furloughed or laid off, if you have a major expense that comes up, you will say to yourself, wow, life is really tough. I don't have enough money to survive. Oh, hold on. The stress will make you remember, oh, no, I have an emergency fund. Joe told me about creating an emergency fund. I put this money away and I hid it in my safe. Now I can live for 6 months comfortably while I search for another job, while I start my business, while I travel, whatever it may be. I mean, I've been hit with this issue. So after one of the hurricanes, my roof was damaged, and I had to get it fixed right away. Otherwise, the damage would have become even more. So I hired a contractor, brought them out. I didn't know the process. This is the first home that I ever bought. And so he said, hey, you're going to have to pay me the money. I said, the insurance company's going to pay. He said, yeah, buddy, the insurance company's going to pay you after you've paid me, but you have to pay me first. And the total for the roof and everything was like $12,000, something like that. And I was just like racking my brain thinking, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? Okay, I scrapped together, 2 bank accounts. Okay, I've got 5,000 between my 2 bank accounts. Where am I going to get this other 7,000? And then it dawned on me, hold on, I have $7,000 in cash, in my safe, in my closet. I went, I got the cash, I deposited it in the bank, I cut him a check, done. Within a month, within 3 weeks, I had the check from the insurance company that covered the total expense. I took my emergency funds, I put it right back. So you want to put it in a place where you're not going to think about it. Now, after you've saved emergency funds, and you can save up to 3 months or up to 6 months. But like I said, if you have shared expenses, shoot for 6 months. After you have that money there, now you want to start to invest. The biggest, I want to say the biggest obstacle that I see people do is, or put in front of them, is they use this statement that's in front of you. I can't invest because I don't make enough money. I'm not making enough money because I can't invest. Circular logic. I can't invest because I don't make enough money, but I can't make enough money because I don't make enough money because I can't invest. So when are you ever going to do anything? So I have a client who recently started an investment account, and she is 43, 44 years old. And she's worked, Ivy League graduate, and worked great jobs, and very intelligent. And I said to her, why have you never invested before? And she said, I was always told that investing was for the rich. I didn't know that I could start an investment with a small amount of money. One of probably the biggest cases of philanthropy in the United States was a man who worked for a very prestigious private school. And when he died, he left an endowment of over $8 million for the school to be spent specifically on children at the school. And everybody said, wow, who is this philanthropist? This is an amazing story. We want to know who he is. Was he a professor? Was he a teacher at the school? Was he an administrator? How was he connected to the school? Well, he was the school janitor. He never had any children of his own, but he loved the children of the school. And from every single paycheck, he would take part of his paycheck and invest a few $100s. And so by the time he died, he had amassed $8 million, which he left as an endowment for the school. So you can start with a very small amount of money and allow it to build up over time. If you simply saved $1 a day at a very, very modest 6% profit, and you reinvested it over 30 years, if you're 20 years old right now, okay, or you're 25 years old, by the time you're 65, 55, 65, 70, over 35 years, you can go from simply putting away almost $10,000 to $11,000 to having close to $45,000 just by putting $1 a day away. So $365 a year. See how the curve separates? When you start investing, you don't realize, that your money's actually working. You're not going to realize it until you're just about here at year 8 when things start to separate, and then exponentially it takes off. What if you did more? What if you put away $5 a day? So $1,800 a year. So you would only having, over 35 years, you would have contributed around $60,000. But in your bank account, you'd have $210,000. So the idea is to start small and be consistent, because the biggest determining factor of your financial success in retirement is not huge lump sums that you put away, but it's consistency of savings, even small amounts. That's what allows you for that to snowball. Now, this is called the power of compounding. And I reiterate this because in talking to the Muslim community about finance, I find many misconceptions about this. People say, well, and this chart you said 6%, and isn't that interest, and this is haram, and I'm not going to invest because I'm afraid. Okay, let's dial it back. Compounding is the ability of an asset to generate earnings. And then you take those earnings, and instead of spending them, you put them back into the business. So it refers to making earnings off of the previous earnings. It does not mean interest. If you put your money into interest-bearing accounts, yes, and it compounds, yes, it will be compound interest. But if you make halal earnings through investments and you reinvest them in the same thing without spending them, then you've made compound earnings. So the idea of compounding is simply taking whatever you made, whether it was legitimate or illegitimate, and allowing it to go back into the investment and grow. So we as Muslims, we're going to avoid the haram, but we're going to allow our permissible investments to compound. Now, I know that there's a lot of questions about investments that come up, and I want to show you this book. I think that this is one of the best books that you can start with to start learning about investments early on. It's very short, it's succinct. I don't think it's maybe more than 75 to 100 pages. It's called The Investment Answer, and it focuses on 5 key decisions that you need to understand. Should I invest it on my own, or should I get professional help? How do I allocate my investments? Do I have stocks, bonds, cash, crypto? What do I do? What specific asset classes within those broad categories should I include in my portfolio? Should I be actively managed or passively managed? When should I sell my assets, and when should I buy more? Very basic questions, answered expertly by the authors. And really, really, I can't stress this book. It's such a good book for you. If you want to know about investments, it's such a good book to start with. Now, this is the summary of the book with a little bit of Islamic flavor at the end. So who will handle your money? I'll handle it. If you'll handle it, either you'll use a robo-advisor, Betterment, Wealth Simple, Sharia Portfolios Express Service, Wahid Invest, or you'll open up a brokerage account where you'll manage it yourself. Schwab, Fidelity, TD Ameritrade. When you have your own brokerage account, you're going to do one of 3 things. Buy a stock, hold it for a long term, never sell it. It's called value investing. Day trading, you're going to buy, sell, buy, sell, buy, sell, try to corner the market and make money off of arbitrage. Or swing trading, buy 1 month, sell a few months down the line, but you're not going to hold it long term for the year. Now, if someone else will manage your money, then they're going to give you a managed brokerage account. And that means they're going to do exactly the same thing, either buy and hold, day trade, swing trade, but they'll do that either actively by trading all the time in the market and analyzing your portfolio and making trades on your behalf, or they'll have a long-term passive strategy where they're not necessarily trying to beat the market that year. They're trying to beat the market over the next 30 years. So they're just going to buy and hold and only sell if something goes really sour. And then the third is called a fee-only advisor. They don't hold your money for you. They don't make the trades. They don't make the investments. What do? They say, you can invest in A, B, and C is probably the best decision for you. And then you go and you invest in C if you like that one. And then lastly is these three conditions, or these three questions. When do I rebalance? When do I make sure that my percentage of international to U.S. stocks is the same, or has it changed? How do I diversify? Do I want to put all of my money in tech stocks, or all of my money in agricultural stocks, or all of my money in cash? How do I diversify and choose different types of stocks and investments? And then lastly, as a Muslim, how do I screen for Sharia compliance? Is a big misnomer, a big mistake that people make. And they say, well, brother, I understand, but every time something is labeled as halal, it just costs more, and it doesn't give us, it's not as good. And I don't believe that I'll probably be better with a mix of bonds and other things, even though they're haram. I'm going to be better off financially. In actuality, it's completely wrong. And statistics, the financial industry statistics are well known. To give you an example, if you look here, you got the S&P 500, the Russell 3000, and the MSCI KLD Social Index, which is an ethical index. It's beat both the Russell 3000 and the S&P 500 for over 25 years, focused on environmental and social impact. Vanguard's one of the Vanguard funds, that is a growth fund, has averaged 8% over the last 10 years. Amana Mutual Fund's growth fund, which is modeled largely on that Vanguard fund, because it avoids debt and it avoids interest-bearing securities, and it avoids haram income, has actually averaged between 10 and 12%, more than 2 to 4% more than the safe haram one. So, and that's an average over 10 years. So there's no truth to the idea that if you invest your money in a halal manner that you're going to make less. In fact, it's one of the lies that portfolio managers try to tell you, because they many times want you to go into bonds. They want you to go into insurance. They want you to go into things that they will get a commission from. I'm just being blatantly honest with you. And sure, if you are selling insurance and you get a commission, I understand that completely. I'm not saying that that's wrong. What I'm saying is that as far as investing for your retirement, you want to make sure that you're doing what's best for you, morally, religiously, financially, so that you can end at that time pleased with the choices that you've made. Now, when we screen the stock market, I'm going to go through this pretty quickly, but when you screen the stock market, you want to take out any companies whose primary earnings are haram. Gambling companies, medical marijuana, recreational marijuana, alcohol, adult entertainment, financial services because they're involved in lending, defense, arms, weapons manufacturing because they manufacture things that harm and kill people. Now, some things like Smith & Wesson for guns, okay. Raytheon, where you're creating drones, not okay. But you want to generally look at the business screens and make sure that, hey, if I were a Muslim, would I allow myself to own this type of business? No, I would. That would be haram. Therefore, I don't invest in companies that do that. There are a number of different financial screens that different financial bodies around the world have used for determining how a company is managed and managing its finances. Even if its revenue is permissible, it still has to manage its finances in a way that meets our values as Muslims. So we look at debt to average market cap, debt to average, or cash to market cap, cash to assets, and then we make sure that non-compliant secondary earnings like interest income that the company brings in is less than 5%. And if you want to do this really easily, there's an app which, disclaimer, I am the advisor for. It's called Zoya, ZOYA.finance. It's for iPhone and Android. You download it, you put in a stock ticker. It tells you, is it Sharia compliant? You know, can you invest in it or not? What are the financials? When were they last reported? Gives you everything in a very succinct, accessible manner. Now, when we talk about, you know, diversification, what do you want to put your funds into? This is a very, I'm sure that even some of you here have probably studied finance and you know this type of stuff better than me. But I want to, you know, for those of us that don't know it, I want to give you just this to kind of look at what you should be thinking about as where you're putting your money. If you have a pie of $100,000, well, 50,000 of that should go into something that is stable. Okay, that's going to return the like of what the market is doing. So an index fund, something like SPUS or HLAL, something that's going to return the like of what the market trajectory is. Then you want to diversify. You don't want everything in the American markets. So you can put 15% into foreign equity, whether that's foreign stock markets, whether that's angel investing in startups in other countries, but you can put something so that you see the upside of that. 5% should be in gold or cash. Now, some investors do this, not all. Some will put 15% in farmland or real estate. So a real estate investment trust or in farmland. Farmland's actually really good because everybody needs to eat, and farmland has always seen about a 15 to 20% return year over year. And it's highly uncorrelated to the rest of the assets. So even if stock market goes down, your farmland's still going to be selling food. And then lastly is something that tracks income, and that's going to give you consistent dividends that are going to grow over time. And this is just a sample. There's many other ways to splice it. You could achieve this by taking SPUS, which is an S&P 500 fund, amount of mutual growth, amount of mutual income, and then like a gold ETF. And you're done. Four funds. You know, you could put some crypto in there if you want to. Well, some people do that. The important thing is, though, is that you understand what those asset classes are and that you consistently put money into the fund to be able to allow it to grow. Now, why did I go through all of that right now? Because inevitably, everyone's questions lead to what is actually not the most important thing to ask. What do I mean by that? I mean that everyone comes and they say, but I have a new job, I have a 401k. Are 401ks halal? I heard they were haram. Is this glass haram? This glass. Is a glass can a glass ever be haram? A glass? It's just a glass. It's not halal or haram. It's mubah. It's just allowed. What you put inside the glass determines of whether you can drink from it, when you can drink from it, how you can drink from it. So if I put wine in this glass, haram. If I put water in the glass, halal, right? If I mix water and fruit juice, halal. So my glass is my 401k. My glass is my IRA. My glass is my pension. My glass is my brokerage account. My glass is my 529 for my children's education, or Coverdell ESA, or UTMA. So a lot of people say, well, I need to know if this specific type of account is halal or haram. And they're all permissible, but you have to ask, what are they investing in? What are they putting into your cup? When can you get stuff out of that cup? Can you drink from it anytime, like a regular brokerage account? Or can you only drink from it after a year, like a Roth IRA? Or can you only drink from it after you retire, like a 401k? Or can you not drink from it at all, like a 529, and only your children can drink from it? So, I always end with this because I want people to understand that all of these names that people ask about most of the time and that are offered through your employer are simply different types of cups. And so once you understand that you can put anything in a cup, then you can pretty much do whatever you want to make sure that it is halal, just like you've done for everything else. Now, another important question that comes up is, especially with people that are new in their career, is student loans. You're in college. Can I even take a student loan? What if I have student loans that I took and I'm not able to get rid of them? And then what student loan relief programs are there for me? I want to say that I'm always puzzled by the dilemma of our children going to college debt free. I've been to masjids, and we might have even done this exercise at Mu'mineen once or twice. I mean, mashallah, the last time I was at Mu'mineen, we did the poverty game where we learned how to budget and do zakah. And I think there were about 250 people there that day. Now, just imagine that we had 250 people in a room, and every single one of them committed to paying $5 a month. How much money will we have at the end of the month? $1,250. How much money will we have at the end of the year? $15,000. How much money will we have in the end of 5 years? $75,000. How much money will we have in 10 years? $150,000. And if we as a community only give him $5, we're also putting that into a fund and investing it the way that we talked about, then in 30 years, we would have no children in our community that would ever need to borrow or take a student loan again. Make it merit-based, allow them to show that they actually have earned the right to take from that community fund. And now, no more student loan problems, no interest, nothing. So, Sufyan al-Thawri rahimahullah used to say, لا تضر مفارقة الأبدان إذا اجتمعت القلوب. Bodies being separate never harmed us as long as the hearts are together. Are our hearts together? Do we see the necessity of creating a legacy and allowing the children of our community that are young now, as we were young one day in the TTY program, to then be catapulted forward and go even farther than we did? That's a question. So if you're saying, okay, Joe, that doesn't answer the question, can I even take a student loan? If you are in a situation where you cannot complete your education except by taking a student loan, then yes, you can take a student loan. Why? Because there are no other alternatives for you. And so just as eating dead meat becomes permissible when you are starving and have nothing else, then taking a student loan becomes permissible, with the caveat that you don't make that your meal day in and day out. You don't just go straight to the student loan. You should try and see what scholarships are available, what grants are available. Can I work and pay some of these fees? And then look to the student loan. If you have outstanding student loans from the past, what you should be trying to do is, number one, pay them off as quickly as possible. Number two, if they have varying different interest rates, consolidate them and pay one cheaper interest rate. Because if you have a debt that has an interest rate of 6%, an interest rate of 2%, an interest rate of 14%, an interest rate of 7%, well, that's all a bunch of different loans at different amounts, and you're going to lose track. And with student loans, they usually compound daily. I just had a client of mine, husband and wife, they made a priority to pay off their student loans. And alhamdulillah, they had $280,000 worth of student loans that they owed. And as of today, they only owe $50,000. And by September, October of this year, they will have completely paid off $280,000 worth of student loans and saved themselves almost $100,000 in interest payments over 30 years. Why? Because they put everything that they had into paying off those loans. Because they understand that the more interest you pay, then the greater your loss will be in the future. And the less interest you pay over time, the more you'll make from your own investments. Because if you're constantly paying interest, that's like a negative investment. I hear this all the time. People say, yeah, I'm invested in the stock market and I made 12% and my portfolio did really well. But then they have credit card debt that has 20% interest. They have a student loan with 7% interest. They're paying the minimum on their credit card. So not only are they paying, you know, ridiculous credit card rates, but it's rolling over and getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And they're paying interest on interest. So if you have outstanding loans, do everything that you can to pay them down. Number two, look into student relief programs like the Jobs Act from the American government. If you work in certain areas, certain nonprofits, certain hospitals, you can get student loan relief. Also, look to acceducate.org, a continuous charity, educate.org. And inshallah, I'm going to do a program with them on Clubhouse this Wednesday. We're going to talk about paying down a student loan debt. They will loan you interest-free, what will allow you to pay off your student loan, and then you can pay them back over time. So really important that you do everything that you can to be able to get those student loans out. Now, how do you pay down your debt? There's three ways. One is called the debt snowball, one is called the debt avalanche, and one is called the debt snow cone. The debt snowball says, list all of your debts, order them from smallest dollar amount to largest dollar amount, then pay them off one by one. Every month I have $10 on this debt. I pay $10, $10, $10 until it's completely gone. Then I take that $10, I add it. Next one is $50. I pay that consistently. Now I take that $50 and then I add it to the next one. And so I'm consistently going down the list from smallest amount of money owed to largest amount of money owed, and it's snowballing. The avalanche says, I'm not going to look at the dollar amounts. I'm going to look at the interest rates. And I'm going to pay off the largest interest rate first, even if it's a small amount, even if it's a big amount. And then I'll go to the interest rate that's less than that. That way, I pay off less interest over the term. And then thirdly, the debt snow cone says, I find the largest amount with the highest interest rate, and I pay it off. Then I find the second largest amount with the second highest interest rate, and I pay it off, and I go down the list. And you might say to yourself, well, which of these is best for me? Put all of your debts with their interest rates, if you have them, into an Excel sheet and sort them and see which of them is going to be easiest for you to do, and then take action. When one of you has a seedling in his hand and the day of judgment starts, plant it. So this is a really important slide for all of you. And I call it your financial stack. So what should you be doing when we talk about all of your finances? Number one, pay your immediate expenses. Number two, use any leftovers after the end of the day to create emergency fund. Number three, pay off all of your debts, doing what we just said about highest interest rate to amounts. Number four, pay yourself first. Contribute to your 401k, contribute to your 403b, contribute to your IRA, your traditional or Roth, contribute to your HSA. Those are called tax advantaged accounts because you can put money in without having to pay tax, or you put money in after having tax and then it grows tax-free. Then any money after that that's left over, put it into a taxable brokerage account. You say, but I don't want to pay tax on it. Look, you're going to pay taxes one way or the other. But it's an extremely low cost, extremely low tax, high growth account because you choose what you invest in. So you take everything that you are keeping in a savings account, earning interest, which would be haram, and you put it into an index fund, which is going to get you, we said 8 to 10% year over year. Even if you said, no, that's not safe, go to my Instagram account. I did a highlight on using gold, silver, and platinum ETFs for a savings account. And you'll earn 5% at the end of the year instead of 0.5% of interest. So save your purchasing power by investing in taxable accounts, and then set major goals and personal spending, and then start chipping away at them. I want to make Hajj. I got to save money. I want to take my parents for Hajj. I want to buy a house. I need a car. Those major goals you can do after you've done all of that stuff. But following the order here is extremely important. And then lastly, we want to talk about being strategic. Think about what happens after you die. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمْ إِذَا حَضَرَ أَحَدَكُمُ الْمَوْتِ إِن تَرَكَ خَيْرًا الْوَصِيَّةُ لِلْوَالِدَيْنِ وَالْأَقْرَبِينَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ حَقًّا عَلَى الْمُتَّقِينَ. Prescribed for you, when any of you is visited by death and he leaves behind some goods, is to make a testament in favor of his parents and kinsmen honorably. Obligation on the God-fear. So you have an obligation to save money and pass it on to your children and your parents and your brothers and your sisters and your wives and your husbands. This is an obligation from Allah. It's part of your taqwa. Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas, he came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I'm sorry, the Prophet sallallahu came to him. He was sick. He thought he was dying. The Prophet came to him and Sa'ad, he said, "Oh, Messenger of Allah, I have a lot of money. I only have one daughter. Should I just give away all of my money?" He said, "No." "Should I give away 2/3 of my money?" "No." "Should I give away half of my money?" "No." "Should I give away 1/3 of my money?" He said, 1/3, but 1/3 is still too much. For you to leave your family rich, wealthy, independent is better than to leave them dependent, begging of the people. So securing what you have now and leaving it for the next generation is a goal. And even you might be saying, but I'm too young, I don't have money, but you will. And you can help facilitate your families, your parents, your grandparents to protect what they have, to diminish the arguments that happen at the time of death, so that everybody's clear about what's going to happen. The Prophet ﷺ said, it's not permissible for any Muslim who has something to will to stay for 2 nights without his last will and testament written and ready with him. So you have to take this seriously, even if it's just your body. Like, let's say you're here alone, you don't have any next of kin, you die. What's going to tell the city morgue that they can release your body to the masjid? Nothing, unless you have a document that states that. Otherwise, they'll be waiting for somebody to come and claim the body that has the legal right. So even if all you have is your body, then you still want to have a will to be able to protect that. So why is this important to have a will and to protect everything, all of the wealth that we talked about building? Because it can take care of your loved ones after you die. The money goes to who you want, not who the state wants. You can achieve your personal goals even after you die by telling your family to give charity on your behalf. And you can also reduce your taxes by proper planning. So what does it do? Everything that's listed on here, a good estate plan should do. It should take care of your kids, should allow you to give money to those that you want to. It should leave instructions to your family. It should protect certain types of assets. If you're married and you're in a state like Texas where property is shared between spouses, it should make it easy to divide that up, something called a marital property agreement. It should dispose of your property to your inheritors properly. It should appoint a power of attorney if you're physically or mentally impaired before you pass. It should minimize estate and inheritance taxes, and it should minimize settlement costs. So what should it include? These are the 6 documents that you need for an Islamic estate plan. You need a family declaration, which is just a letter that you would write to your family, encouraging them to fear Allah, to remain upon Islam, to treat each other kindly, and what to do after you pass away. 2, you need a legally valid Sharia compliant will. And if you live in 2 countries or you have property in 2 countries, you need a will in each country. So you're in Houston, you're between Houston and Nigeria, Houston and Egypt, Houston and Turkey, wherever you're between, and you own property in both of those countries, have a will in each country. That way, it will not be delayed and your property will not be taken advantage of. Also, you need an advanced medical directive, takes care of medical emergencies. Durable power of attorney allows your family to act on your behalf when you can't. If you have a lot of money, I mean a lot of money, then you need a trust. If you don't need it. Most people, I heard is probably the most famous scholar after Sheikh Google. I heard that you need a trust. No, you don't. You only need a trust in generally two situations. If you have over $5 million of net worth, or you have a special needs child, that's when you need a trust. Otherwise, don't worry about it. You'll waste your money by trying to get one created. And then lastly, you need a marital property agreement, because the state of Texas says if you're married in Texas, all of your property is commingled, all of it's together. You say, no, we're Muslims. We have our own separate liabilities for both debts and property rights, and we treat that separately. You and your spouse both have to sign that. So if you can do that, then you can make a lot of money, you can give a lot of money, and you can protect all of that money that you have created and leave it behind for future generations. And with that, I will conclude, and I'd love to hear questions. I don't know how we're going to be fielding all the questions, but happy to read. So let me go back here. Let me see. So on Instagram, actually, my Instagram, I'll put the Instagram here, is actually _ Joe Bradford. Okay, _ Joe Bradford. But if you search Joe Bradford, it's pretty much only me. Do I do will preparations for Muslims? So I own a company called mywasiya.com that does wills for Muslims. Excellent question. How can a teenager start investing? I got a call from my adopted nephew the other day. He's 13 years old. He made $800 by selling his old video games on eBay. And he called me up and he said, Uncle, I'm going to take all my money and I'm going to put it in the Sharia portfolio S&P 500 fund. Should I put all $800? I said, yes. So he opened up a Fidelity account on his own, and then he started to invest. His parents called me and they put me on a Zoom call together. They're like, oh, what's going on? What's going on? I said, what's the issue? His father's someone that I grew up with like a brother. He said, I'm just not sure if this is safe. I said, yeah, it's safe. He said, well, I don't know about this. I said to him, Yusuf, did you research this? He said, yes, I did. And I called you and we went over all of this. And this is the best thing to do. So his father had never invested, but this boy was 13 years old. He was already starting to invest. So if you are a teenager, yes, open up a Roth IRA. And put everything that you get in there if you've got very little expenses. So Musaddiq Bello says, we learned from a previous lecture that a trust is needed if you have more than 150,000 net worth. Now you say 5 million, please clarify. Tax laws have changed. And I think actually 5 million is actually low. It's actually more like 11 million. But if you want to prevent certain types of disputes over it, then 5 million is a safe amount. And you can always talk to, if you're considering to make a trust, and somebody tells you that it's the lower amount, say, okay, tell me why and prove it to me. Show me the regulations from the IRS. If I recall, the IRS regulations about 2 years ago went up to about 11 million underneath the Trump administration. I use 5 million because generally if a person has 5 million in net worth, then they probably have a business that will grow by the time they pass away that would be up to the taxable limit. So can a teenager open a Roth IRA? Yes. So what you should do is you should Google this, Roth IRA for kids. And you'll find on the Fidelity website a really good article about how to do that. Is mortgage permitted? Depends on the type of mortgage. Khadija says, and Binta says, is it halal to invest in Bitcoin and Ethereum? Yes, and you can go to joebradford.net/Bitcoin and read everything that I wrote about it, and there's some videos there too. We were advised to have a trust instead of a will. You should have a will, always should have a will. A trust is additional, but it's because generally your money, your estate is always going to go to probate. So you should always have a will, but having a trust is optional. Are dividends from REITs, portfolios of individual retail spaces, haram? No. So real estate investment trust invests in real estate, and they are mandated by law to pay you a dividend every year. So what you need to do is make sure that the REIT that you are invested in is a equity REIT and not a mortgage REIT. So if it's an equity REIT, they're just buying property and leasing it. But if it's a mortgage REIT, they're leveraging loans, and you don't want that. So a nice ticker is O, the letter O. That's a REIT that I've looked in and is Sharia compliant. Bilqis says, is it okay to buy a house on mortgage if you need a house? If it is an absolute necessity, then yes, and any mortgage will do. But you should always try to minimize the amount that you would have to borrow, and get the best deal for you. And if you want more on this, there's a series of like 3 videos that I did on YouTube about getting mortgages as a Muslim. I think that's the best thing to look at. Is Vanguard permitted? Vanguard is a brand, and they do a lot of different funds. So you would have to look at the fund. Remember the glass, right? Your company said you can borrow money from your 401k, but you must pay back with interest to yourself. No one will get it but yourself. Is that permissible? Yes, it is permissible. Why? Because scholars are in agreement that you cannot pay interest to yourself. If I take $5 out of my right pocket and I put $6 into my left pocket, I have not paid myself interest. I have simply paid myself. So then why do they charge interest? Well, they charge interest because they want to make sure that, or they charge interest, meaning that they want you to put more in than you took out, because they want to make sure that you stay on track for your retirement savings despite having taken a loan against the account. A few questions from earlier. Can non-Muslims inherit from Muslims? So in inheritance, there are 2 issues. There are charitable gifts, that's 1/3 of your property, and there are inheritance percentages that are drawn out in the Quran. Inheritance percentages that are drawn out in the Quran only go to Muslims. The charitable gifting can go to anyone. And so if you have non-Muslim relatives, wife, mother, cousin, whomever, then you should be giving them part of that charitable gift to make sure that they are appreciated. Are we allowed to take a student loan with the intention of entering a relief plan? Oh, that's a good one, Yusra. I have not been asked that question before, and so I would need to contemplate that. But definitely reach out to me, and I will find an answer for you, inshallah. Latif says, can non-Muslims inherit from Muslims? Should paying off all debts come before Hajj and investment in account? Okay, so I think the 2 questions got mixed up there. Should paying off all debts become before Hajj and investment in accounts, crypto, etc.? Debts only affect your ability to make Hajj if the debt is currently due in its entirety. If it is a scheduled debt, then you only need to pay the month or the quarter that's due. So if you have $100,000 in student loans and your monthly payment is $200 and Hajj comes around, then you need to make sure that you have paid your $200 and you left enough money at home for your family to survive, and then you make Hajj. Investments, no, you should invest in the meantime, because you can always dip into the investments and use those for Hajj. If anyone wants to speak, please click and raise the hand. We'll unmute you. Okay. Can you recap the site to check whether a investment is halal or not? Yes, thank you very much. That's the link. It's zoya.finance. Okay, wonderful. Well, it looks like we have exhausted the questions, but is it okay to use the app Acorn for investment? The problem with Acorn is that they take your money, and it's a great system, but they take your money and they invest it in things you don't know what it's being invested in. It could be invested in halal, it could be invested in haram. So it's better for you to automate your investments on your own. I actually use M1 Finance for that. So it automates, takes money out of my account every week and puts it into a basket of halal funds and ETFs. And I don't have to worry about whether it's haram or not later.
I saw somebody with their hand up earlier. Did your question get answered? If not, you can go ahead and raise your hand again.
Okay, someone said, is there alternatives to Wahid on Robinhood? I don't understand the question. And then Rhoda asks, as well as Robinhood. So Robinhood is simply a type of brokerage account. You choose what you want to invest in. The problem with Acorn is that you generally don't get to choose what you invest in. Wahid is a brokerage, but they don't necessarily have an app. You can really use any brokerage. Again, it's that idea of the cup, right? The brokerage account is the cup. Whatever you put in it, whether it's a Robinhood account, Wahid account, a TDI Ameritrade account, Schwab, whatever it is, it's the cup that it's not the cup that's matters. It's what you put in it. Someone says, can you answer the REITs question again, please? I didn't hear the response. Yes, REITs are permissible, but you need to use equity REITs, not mortgage REITs. Is it okay paying the fees to accounts like Charles Schwab, Fidelity? Yes, because they're providing you a service. There's a concern about how the stock market works. It can be easily manipulated, and Islam is against manipulation. Kindly clarify with regards to recent GameStop stock manipulation. So the stock market is permissible, but individual stocks and individual purchases may at times be impermissible. So with GME, there was a lot of market manipulation and people artificially driving up the price through short squeezes and gamma squeezes and things like that. And that's something that's forbidden for us as Muslims to engage in, which the Prophet ﷺ called najash, where it's artificial price manipulation. That's where you get people to rush in and act like they're buying or to buy up so that everybody else rushes in and buys, and then you dump the stock afterwards. So you want to be careful. And I actually did a whole IGTV thing on my Instagram that you can go and read. It's about 20 minutes long. Ayatollah says, what type of life insurance and mutual funds can be non-haram? Well, the mutual funds are the ones that have non-haram investments. Life insurance should be a mutual life insurance company with a proper corporate social responsibility or ESG charter. And you should, with basically those two things. And for life insurance, again, I went through all of the details on that. If you type into YouTube, is life insurance haram, Joe Bradford, the video will come up.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
What is one of the most common mistakes people make with their finances, and what should people look out for?
I think one of the most common mistakes that people make is not taking action early enough. So there is a lot of fear about managing your own finances. It's something called financial avoidance. It's actually, psychological. And so a lot of it is, I don't know enough. I'll never know enough. Therefore, I won't do anything. And you miss out on opportunities, or you end up spending too much. And so, that's why I stressed education in the beginning, and that it's from our values as Muslims to educate ourselves on these issues and to take action. And I would say that inaction without education is very bad. But inaction with education is actually very good. Because after you invest, the worst thing you can do is to just buy, sell, and deplete all of the gains that you get. The best thing you want to do is after you've invested, sit on it and allow it to grow for as long as possible. But if you have inaction and you don't take, you haven't actually educated yourself on how to invest, then that is a problem. Someone said, what's the name of the company that allows you to pay your student loan interest free? The one you'll be talking about on Wednesday. It's acceducate.org. Yes, thank you so much. Our ETFs and S&P index halal stocks. So you want to look at SPUS as the ticker. That will be the S&P 500 index minus the haram stocks. Is an annuity permissible? No, it is not. Unless it is a variable annuity where you can select what types of investments are made, and then the investments are halal, permissible investments. Fatia says, with paying zakat al-mal, do you need to be 100% debt free? What debts can you still have while paying zakat al-mal? So you pay zakat al-mal, but you only deduct the debts that are due. So if I have $10,000 in savings and I owe $1,000, or let's say I owe $1,500 for my home payment and another $500 for my car payment, now I have $2,000 worth of debts that I've paid off. And then I take and I pay 2.5% of $8,000 instead of 2.5% of $10,000. Which is the best site with the lowest fees and halal? All the sites are halal. You just have to choose the right investments, which have the lowest fees. I'm sure you can put a fee comparison into Google and it'll come up. Some have argued that options are haram. What are options and are they halal? So options are a right, not an obligation, to buy an underlying stock or sell it. And there is considerable debate about whether they are permissible. Some saying no, some saying at times if you own the stock, and some saying yes at any times. I hold that they are permissible because the basis is that all transactions are permissible until proven otherwise. And there is a basis in the Sharia for buying and selling rights. Someone said, what do you think about monthly expenses, 70, 30, 10% assets and savings? Yeah, I think that's good. I think that, Idris is asking, you just want to make sure that that's what makes sense for you. The percentages are not as important as actually taking action. Sadiq says, I have my mortgage with one of the Islamic mortgage companies. Now they're offering me an insurance to protect the mortgage. They mentioned that in case one cannot pay the mortgage for some reason, the insurance will kick in. Is insurance to protect a mortgage halal? I would need to know, what type of insurance company it is and how they're offering it. And until I see that, I wouldn't be able to say. If we made a gain on the GMA stock, what do we do now with it if we learn it's haram? If you made gains on the GME stock, but you didn't do it because you were trying to harm other people, your intention was, this is a great investment, I'm going to invest, then the gains are halal. But if you intentionally went in with the idea that, I'm gonna pump up the price so that I can take money from people, then the gains would be haram. So it has to do with your intention.
All right, assalamu alaikum, guys. If you have a few more questions, and then we're going to go ahead and end. So it's been 2 hours since the.
Yeah, Jazakallah khair. My voice is kind of cracking now too. Someone said, is home insurance permissible if you own it at front? So it's going to be mandatory for you to have home insurance. Yeah. I think you're saying if you owe it, if you own the home and you don't have any payments on it, it's still permissible, but you should find a mutual insurance company. Ibrahim says, what is the alternative you mentioned earlier to Acorns? M1 Finance. What site is best with the lowest fees and halal? Again, no site is better. Well, all the sites are halal because they're simply cups. They simply hold whatever you put halal in it. But the fees, you can look for a fee comparison. I don't know that off the top of my head. Ayatollah says, what fraction of our money and when should be directed towards our new businesses? So you should never start a new business unless you have 6 months to a year's living expenses above and beyond all of your other finances. That way you can float yourself and your needs while you get your business off of the ground.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Jazakallah khair, Sheikh Joe. You can find Sheikh Joe Bradford on his website, joebradford.net, as well as you can find him on Instagram, I believe at Joe Bradford. Okay, so now to conclude, we're going to have Imam Ibrahim give us a closing dua. And if you have any more questions for Sheikh Joe, you can find him on his website. All right, Imam Ibrahim.
Are you on mute?
Okay, maybe it's not there anymore. Okay.
Like if you can't reach him, maybe you can call on Brother Musaddiq Bello to give us the closing.
I was getting to that, Mr. Sheikh. Mr. Musada Bello, if you would go ahead and conclude our program with a closing dua, please.
Yes, Alhamdulillah, 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 Rabbil Alameen. On behalf of the TTY alumni, I want to thank Sheikh Joe Bradford. Thank you very much. It was very beneficial, very useful, and I think it's very timely also. As we are.
Alhamdulillah, thank you so much for having me. It's a blessing to always be with you.
Alhamdulillah. I also want to thank our brothers and sisters of the TTY alumni who put this program together. It's very, it makes one very happy to see the young ones stepping up and doing a beneficial program like this for the entire community. So brothers and sisters of TTY alumni, thank you very much. As Brother Dr. Rashid said at the beginning, let this be the beginning and not the end. Let us do many more of these programs. I'll use this opportunity also to thank all the TTY coordinators of the past, those who spend their time and to make the TTY successful, and those who started it and those who took it from them and even made it even better. May Allah reward each and every one of you. So, and for all those who attended today, may Allah make this knowledge beneficial for us. Let it be something we can actually put into practice. And we will look back a few years later and say, oh, I really benefited from that lecture. So together, let us recite Surah Al-Asr and Subhanaka to end the program. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Wal-Asr, inna al-insana lafi khusr, illa alladhina amanu wa amilu salihat, wa tawasaw bil-haqq, wa tawasaw bis-sabr. Subhanaka Allahumma bihamdik, shadan la ilaha illa ant, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you all again for participating in this program. Inshallah, we'll have a few more programs in the near future. So just be patient with us, okay? Stay tuned, all right?
And really quick, before we close off, there's been questions around a recording. So inshallah, we will get a recording and a link out on YouTube for this as well. So just wanted to highlight that before we close off.
All right, guys, assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you, Jazakumullah khair.